I used to think that the final chapter of my life would be quiet, familiar, and filled with the scent of cinnamon and books. After retiring from the El Paso Public Library, where I'd spent 40 years of my life recommending stories and reminding teenagers to whisper, I finally had time to rest. My days were slow but sweet. Morning coffee on the back porch, tending to my tiny herb garden, rereading old paperbacks whose pages smelled like memory. My house wasn't big, just a 2-bedroom adobe on the west side of town, but it was full of history. My husband Miguel and I had bought it after our second son was born. We raised both boys there. Every corner held echoes. Birthday streamers once taped to walls, height marks on the kitchen doorframe, the low hum of bedtime stories read out loud. So when my oldest son, also named Miguel, asked if he, his wife Carla, and their 5-year-old daughter Sophia could move in temporarily to save for a house, I didn't hesitate. Of course, I said. Family always has a place here. I cleaned out the guest room, laid fresh linens with lavender tucked inside the pillowcases, and baked pan dulce for their arrival. The house felt alive again with footsteps, laughter, the buzz of cartoons in the morning. I loved watching little Sophia wander through my bookshelves, picking up anything with animals on the cover. I'd sit on the floor with her, reading aloud just like I used to with her father. There were tiny adjustments, of course. More dishes, more noise, more opinions about what should go where. But I was happy, genuinely happy. I thought maybe this was how my later years were meant to be. Not alone, not forgotten, but surrounded by the family I'd poured my whole heart into. Miguel would tell me, "Mom, we're lucky to have you. Sophia needs this." And every time he said it, my heart stretched just a little wider. I imagined Sunday dinners again. Tamales steaming on the table, Carla sharing her work stories, Miguel grilling out back, Sophia showing me crayon drawings. I thought, maybe I've done something right. Maybe all the sacrifice was worth it. I couldn't have known then that this warmth, this hope, was only the first light before a long, quiet winter. But for now, I believed I was home. Not just in a house, but in the arms of the people I loved most. And that felt like enough. It started small. That's how most things do, I suppose. A gentle suggestion here, a little rearrangement there. Nothing loud, nothing that screamed betrayal. Just quiet shifts. One evening, over a rush dinner of takeout, Miguel turned to me and said, "Hey, Mom, Carla and I were talking. What do you think about moving into the garage for a while?" I blinked. The garage? "Yeah, just temporary," he said quickly. "Sophia needs a proper room. Carla's working from home more now, and we're kind of squeezed. We'll fix it up, paint, get a rug, maybe even a little heater. It'll be nice." I nodded slowly, swallowing the knot in my throat. "Okay," I said, before I fully understood what I was agreeing to. The next weekend, they moved my things, not all at once. First my bookshelves, then the armchair, then the small dresser my husband had built years ago. Carla asked if I'd mind storing my teacups. They didn't match the kitchen's aesthetic. In the garage, they set up a cot and a lamp. Miguel hung an air freshener on the exposed beam and said, "It'll smell better soon." I stood in the middle of it, among storage bins, holiday decorations, and a weed whacker, and tried to call it home. At night, I could hear them laughing upstairs, Sophia running across the floor I used to mop every Saturday. The walls of the garage were thin. So were the excuses. They stopped asking me to eat dinner with them, said they were on a different schedule. When I offered to help with Sophia's homework, Carla smiled and said, "We've got a routine now. It's just easier if we stick to it." Easier. I began to fade in my own home, not through cruelty, not through yelling or slam doors, through convenience, through silence. I told myself it was just a phase, that I was lucky they were here, that I didn't need much. But the truth whispered differently late at night when the only sound was the hum of the garage fridge and the ache in my chest. I wasn't being included. I was being stored. Folded away like an old quilt, kept nearby but out of the way. And the hardest part? They thought they were being kind. The day I found a stranger standing in my living room was the day something broke inside me. She was holding a clipboard dressed in a sleek blazer and heels that clicked too loudly on my worn tile floor. "Hi, I'm Dana from Silver Oak Realty. Your son asked me to take a look at the property." I stood there, still in my gardening gloves, dirt on my hands, trying to make sense of her words. "Property?" I asked. She smiled like I was the elderly neighbor, not the owner. "Yes, the house. We're just doing a preliminary walkthrough. Shouldn't take long." I waited until she left, then sat on the couch, my couch, and stared at the front door. Miguel got home 2 hours later, humming, casual, carrying a bag of groceries like nothing had happened. I didn't yell, I didn't cry, I just asked, "Why is a realtor evaluating my home?" He sighed, set the bag down. "Mom, we were going to talk to you about it. Carla and I are considering selling. The market's hot right now. We could get a great price." "We?" I asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Well, yeah," he said, like it was obvious. "You've said the place is too much for you. We thought maybe you could move into one of those nice senior communities." Senior communities, like I was some old box to be labeled and shipped somewhere appropriate. I slept in the garage that night, but I didn't sleep much. I sat with my knees hugged to my chest, surrounded by paint cans and Christmas lights and the smell of gasoline. And I cried like I hadn't cried since my husband died. Not out loud, not dramatically, just tears, silent, steady, endless. It wasn't the garage. I could have lived in a tent if it meant being loved. It was the realization that I had become inconvenient, that somewhere between story time and bedtime snacks, I had shifted from mom to maintenance, a problem to solve. That night, I didn't dream of fixing things or going back to how it was. I dreamed of a place where I could breathe again, where I wouldn't have to beg for space, where I could be seen, not managed, and maybe, just maybe, where I could begin again. A few days after the realtor visit, I found myself digging through old boxes in the garage, looking for comfort in the form of forgotten memories. The air smelled like dust and regret. I pulled out a small wooden trunk my husband Miguel had built for me decades ago. Inside were faded photographs, old recipe cards, and tucked between 2 worn journals, his last letter to me. I had forgotten about it. He'd written it just weeks before his heart gave out, a letter I hadn't touched in over 20 years because it hurt too much. But now, with my fingers trembling, I unfolded the paper. "Linda, if you're reading this alone, it means life's given you more time than it gave me. You've always been stronger than you know. If the walls of this house ever start to feel like a cage instead of a home, don't stay. You were made to share light. And if this house ever stops reflecting that light, take it somewhere else, somewhere that needs it." I sat with that letter in my lap, the words vibrating in my chest like a bell finally struck. He was right. This place no longer held warmth. It held memories, yes, but ones buried beneath silence and dust and someone else's idea of where I belonged. It wasn't my home anymore. Not truly. That night, I made tea and sat with a notebook and calculator. I reviewed my savings, the current home value, and my modest retirement fund. I didn't have millions, but I had enough to begin again. The next morning, I called my old friend Teresa in Tucson. She ran a literary arts nonprofit that supported senior literacy. "You're not going to believe this," I told her. "I'm ready to work again, volunteer, anything. I just need a change." 3 days later, I had an email from their board. They had an opening for a part-time librarian in residence at their community center, housing included. It wasn't fancy, but it was purpose. It was dignity. I didn't tell Miguel right away. Some decisions don't require permission. Instead, I called a realtor of my own, one I trusted. I ran my hand along the kitchen counter I'd once polished for birthday cakes and homework projects and whispered, "Thank you for everything." Then I folded the letter from Miguel, placed it in my purse, and started quietly planning my escape. I moved into my casita in Tucson on a Monday morning. The air smelled of mesquite and sun-warmed dust, and the desert stretched around me like open arms. It wasn't big, just a 1-bedroom guest house behind the literacy center, but it was mine. Mine in a way I hadn't felt in years. No one told me where to sleep, what to pack away, or how much noise was acceptable. I unpacked slowly, placing Miguel's old letter on the nightstand, next to a photo of us in our 20s, smiling like the world was ours to shape. At the center, they handed me a staff lanyard and a key. I hadn't worn either in over a decade, but it felt familiar, like slipping back into shoes I didn't realize I missed. My days filled quickly. I shelved books, led poetry discussions, helped seniors sign up for their first email accounts. No one cared that I was 74. No one asked if I was still okay on stairs. One afternoon, a woman named Alice, widowed, soft-spoken, in her 80s, told me, "You make this place feel alive." I smiled genuinely. "Funny," I said. "It's done the same for me." Within 3 months, I proposed starting a library specifically for seniors. Quiet spaces with large print books, magnifiers, comfy chairs, and no one rushing them. The board approved it without hesitation. I named it Casa de Lectura, House of Reading. I used the funds from my home sale to renovate an unused wing of the building. I didn't tell Miguel. He wouldn't have understood. He still thought I needed help, not purpose. On the day we opened, we held a small ribbon-cutting ceremony. Nothing fancy, just folding chairs, cookies, and a few neighbors who believed in what we were building. When I cut the ribbon with a borrowed pair of gardening shears, my hands didn't tremble. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was building something. That night, I walked the rows of bookshelves alone, touching the spines like old friends. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't looking back. I didn't need a porch to rock on or a family dinner to be invited to. I had stories to share, people to uplift, light to spread. They put me in a garage, so I built a sanctuary. 6 months after I cut the ribbon at Casa de Lectura, a padded envelope arrived at my casita. The return address was Miguel's. Inside was a small wooden box, the one he made in high school shop class. I hadn't seen it in years. Tucked inside was a note, folded carefully. "Mom, I've been thinking about everything, about the way we treated you. I didn't realize what I was doing until you were gone. Sophia asked me last week why we never visited your house anymore. I didn't have a good answer. She remembers your stories. She misses you. I think, deep down, I miss you too. I know I pushed you out. I understand now that it wasn't just about space. It was about control. You didn't just leave the house. You reclaimed your life. And that's something I never gave you credit for. If you'll have us, Sophia and I would love to visit. No expectations, just a visit. With love, Miguel." I sat on my small porch, the desert sun warming my knees, the sound of the wind nudging chimes near the doorway. I held that letter like it might dissolve in my hands. I didn't cry. Not because it didn't move me, it did, but because the part of me that once begged for that apology had already healed. 2 weeks later, I met them at the literacy center. Sophia ran up first, a crayon drawing flapping in her hand. "Grandma, I drew your library." Miguel followed, slower, sheepish. We didn't hug. We just stood there for a moment, two people carrying a complicated past in silence. Then I smiled. "I've got cookies," I said, "and a whole wall of books that need reading." That day, I didn't try to fix anything. I didn't try to force closeness. I simply let him see me, as I am now, whole, independent, still loving, but no longer small. Later that night, Sophia curled up in the reading chair, clutching a book about stars. Miguel watched her, quiet. "This place," he finally said, "feels more like home than our house ever did." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. He finally understood. And sometimes that quiet recognition is the loudest victory of all. Have you ever felt pushed aside in your own home? You're not alone. Sometimes standing up for yourself doesn't look like shouting. It looks like quietly choosing peace. If you've been through something like this, or if this story reminded you of someone, share your thoughts in the comments. Your story might be the comfort someone else needs right now. And if this touched you, don't forget to subscribe, because there are more quiet, powerful journeys still to come.